Is this his last kick of a football for Chelsea? One kick of the ball by Didier Drogba.
It's May 19th, 2012. At the Allianz Arena in Munich, Didier Drogba steps up to the spot. For Chelsea, years of dreams and disappointments come down to this one kick. It's the conclusion to a season that shattered expectations and that, quite frankly, had no right to unfold the way it did. But first, to really understand how Drogba and Chelsea got here in the first place, we need to rewind. Chelsea had entered that 2011-2012 season under a huge cloud of uncertainty. It had already been nearly a decade since Russian billionaire Roman Abramovich took over the club in 2003. Since that moment, the club had undeniably become one of the powerhouses of English football, winning 4 Premier League titles and 3 FA Cups in those short 8 years. Domestically, they had little left to prove, but on the European stage, it was a completely different story. The one prize Abramovich coveted the most, the Champions League, remained frustratingly out of reach. Just 4 years earlier, in 2008, Chelsea had also been a single penalty away from the greatest moment in their history. John Terry, their captain, stepped up to take what could have been the winning kick of the Champions League final, only for the rain-soaked turf to betray him. Manchester United ultimately won the shootout on that rainy night in Moscow, robbing Chelsea of the opportunity to lift the trophy in Abramovich's home country. A year later, in 2009, another painful chapter had been written. Facing none other than Guardiola's powerhouse Barcelona in the semi-final second leg, Chelsea found themselves on the wrong side of one of the most controversial refereeing performances in Champions League history. To this day, the name Tom Henning-Øvrebø is still enough to make any Chelsea fan flinch. The Blues actually started that match by taking an early lead with a stunning volley from Michael Essien, putting them on course for the final. Chelsea pushed, creating chance after chance, and for much of the game, they looked the stronger side, determined to finish what they had started. But then, as the game went on, their frustrations mounted. Malouda was seemingly brought down in the box, but the referee awarded only a free kick. Not long after, Drogba was clipped by Vidal on the break, yet still no call. And then, in the second half, Anelka's flick struck Piqué's outstretched hand, a blatant penalty, but play continued. With stoppage time approaching, came the moment that broke Stamford Bridge. Andrés Iniesta, finding space at the edge of the box, struck a perfect shot into the top corner, sending Barcelona through to the final. And to cap off the chaos, a last gasp strike from Michael Ballack deflected off of Eto'o's arm. But again, no penalty. Ballack's furious chase after the ref said it all. Chelsea, so close, had crashed out in the most agonizing way, as their Champions League dream slipped from their grasp once more. The 2010-2011 campaign had only deepened the frustration, as they were knocked out in the quarterfinals by Mourinho's Inter Milan. Another reminder of how the man who built Chelsea's foundation years earlier had gone on to conquer Europe with another team. By the time the 2011-2012 season actually rolled around, Chelsea's European failures felt like a weight too heavy to ignore. That summer, Abramovich decided to take a bold step, appointing a young dynamic manager by the name of André Villas-Boas, who was fresh off a Europa League triumph with Porto. At just 33, Villas-Boas was seen as the heir to Mourinho's throne, a tactical prodigy who could bring a fresh attacking philosophy to Stamford Bridge. But the challenge he faced was immense. Chelsea's squad, while still full of legends, was aging. Didier Drogba, Frank Lampard, John Terry, players who had been the bedrock of Chelsea's success for years, were no longer in their prime. Villas-Boas was tasked with phasing in a new era, integrating young talent like Juan Mata, who had just joined from Valencia, and Daniel Sturridge, while trying to overhaul a team that still believed in its old guard. But as the season progressed, it became clear that things were just not clicking. Chelsea were inconsistent in the Premier League. One week they were scraping a win, and the next they were dropping points to teams they should have easily beaten. Villas-Boas' tactics clashed with the established hierarchy, and the dressing room began to fracture. The Champions League round of 16 clash with Napoli was supposed to be Chelsea's way back into the light. Instead, it turned into the lowest point of the season. In the first leg in Naples, Chelsea were simply torn apart. Napoli's front three of Cavani, Lavezzi, and Hamsik ran riot, and Chelsea's defense, disjointed and fragile, crumbled. The game ended 3-1, and the fallout was immediate. Villas-Boas' decision to drop senior players like Lampard and Ashley Cole for such a critical match only deepened the divide between him and the squad. By March, Chelsea found themselves 5th in the league, far from the title race, and even in danger of missing out on Champions League qualification altogether. The tension between Villas-Boas and the senior players was palpable, and it seemed like the situation was reaching a breaking point. Just a few days later, after a 1-0 defeat to West Brom in the Premier League, the inevitable finally happened. Villas-Boas was sacked. In his absence, Chelsea turned to Roberto Di Matteo, an assistant manager with deep ties to the club but far from a household name. Very few people, if anybody, actually expected him to turn the season around. The team was fractured, morale was low, and the Champions League dream was pretty much all but an afterthought. Just days into his tenure, Chelsea faced their make-or-break second leg against Napoli at Stamford Bridge. Trailing 3-1 from the first leg, the task seemed almost impossible. But on March 14th, 2012, with the season hanging by a thread, Chelsea's veterans, players who had been with the team through every heartbreak, rose to the occasion. Drogba, as he had done so many times before, opened the scoring with a powerful header, giving Chelsea life. Then John Terry, their captain, leveled the tie on aggregate, heading the ball home from a corner. But of course, Napoli struck back, and for a moment, the dream wavered. However, Chelsea remained composed, familiar with these moments, and aware of what was needed. When Frank Lampard buried a penalty to send the match into extra time, the atmosphere shifted. Stamford Bridge was alive and fully behind the team. In the 105th minute, Branislav Ivanovic found himself in front of goal and smashed the ball into the roof of the net. Chelsea had actually done it. 4-1 on the night, 5-4 on aggregate, in one of the great Champions League comebacks of the decade. It was a night defined by resilience, experience, and belief, qualities that had carried Chelsea so close to European glory in the past. And with that victory, the season took on an entirely new purpose. With renewed energy, Chelsea were more than ready to face Benfica in the quarterfinals. In the first leg in Lisbon, they managed a gritty 1-0 win, with Salomon Kalou netting the crucial goal. But back at Stamford Bridge, the second leg was anything but straightforward. Benfica, desperate and determined, pressed Chelsea hard and leveled the score late in the game. But just when things looked tense, Raúl Meireles broke forward and scored the 2-1 to seal the match in Chelsea's favor, sending them to the semi-finals. Against all odds, it seemed like Matteo was actually about to do something with Chelsea's season. But although hopeful, what awaited them next was an entirely different challenge. Their opponent in the semi-finals was said to be none other than Barcelona, and the scars of 2009 were still very fresh. The uncalled penalties, Iniesta's last-minute dagger, Chelsea hadn't forgotten. And now, 3 years later, they had a chance to set things right. In the first leg at Stamford Bridge, it was all about survival. Barcelona dominated possession, holding 72% of the ball and sending forward wave after wave of attacks. However, Chelsea managed to hold firm. Peter Čech kept the team in the game, making crucial saves, and the defense threw themselves in front of every shot. Just before halftime, Ramires broke through and put in a cross for Drogba, who finished it without hesitation. Against all odds, Chelsea had a 1-0 lead at the bridge. Despite relentless attacks from Barcelona, Chelsea managed to hold down the fort in the second half, taking the 1-0 lead to the Camp Nou. But no one was under any illusions. The second leg would be war. In one of the most dramatic nights in Champions League history, Chelsea went to Barcelona, determined to finally secure their pass to the Champions League final. But it didn't start well. In the first half, Barcelona took the lead through Busquets, and moments later, John Terry was sent off for kneeing Alexis Sanchez in the back. Down to 10 men, and with the Camp Nou roaring Barca on, it felt like the inevitable was about to happen. When Iniesta scored Barcelona's second, making it 2-1 on aggregate, the writing seemed to be on the wall, and every Chelsea fan feared that this was about to turn into yet another Champions League crash-out. But then, out of nowhere, Ramires chased down a through ball from Lampard and chipped Victor Valdés for a beautiful finish. Just like that, Chelsea were back in front on away goals. The second half was pure chaos. Messi hit the post and then missed a penalty. Chelsea continued to defend like their lives depended on it. In stoppage time, with Barcelona pushing for the winner, Fernando Torres, who had just endured possibly the most difficult season of his career, found himself completely alone and threw one goal.
It's Torres to give Chelsea a place in the Champions League final.
2-2 on the night, 3-2 on aggregate. Chelsea had actually done it. Against all odds, and with an interim manager, they had managed to knock out what was probably the best team in the world. But the job wasn't done yet. The final was set to be played in the Allianz Arena, the home ground of Bayern Munich, and Chelsea were also missing key players. John Terry, Ramires, Ivanovic, and Meireles were all suspended. It felt like yet another mountain had to be climbed. Unexpectedly, Bayern dominated much of the game, both in possession and with chances. But Peter Čech, in his usual form for that season, was simply a brick wall. Save after save, he kept Chelsea in the game. But when Thomas Müller finally broke through with a header in the 83rd minute, it really seemed like Chelsea's journey was about to end in heartbreak once again. But something was different. This Chelsea team had built their entire season on resilience. Just 5 minutes later, they won a corner. Juan Mata swung it in, and who else but Didier Drogba rose highest, powering a header past Manuel Neuer and tying the score 1-1. Then, in extra time, Bayern had the chance to finally win it as a penalty was awarded after Drogba himself fouled Frank Ribery in the box. Arjen Robben stepped up to take it, but Peter Čech, in one of the finest moments of his career, pulled off the save. The match would have to be decided by penalties. The shootout was tense, every shot carrying the weight of Champions League history. Bayern struck first. Then Mata, their most creative player, was the first to miss, putting Bayern in control. Gomez and Neuer converted for Bayern, while David Luiz, Frank Lampard, and Ashley Cole kept Chelsea's hopes alive. Then it was Ivica Onic's turn. With a chance to seal it for Bayern, he stepped into the spot. But Peter Čech, Chelsea's savior once again, managed to guess right, diving low to make the save. Suddenly, it was level all over again. Bayern's final taker, Bastian Schweinsteiger, was the next to shoot, but the nerves took over. His shot, much like Terry's years earlier, struck the post, and Chelsea's fate was finally in their own hands. One kick away from history, and there was only one man for the job. The player who had carried Chelsea through countless battles now had the final say. Didier Drogba, with the weight of years of heartbreak and near misses, took his place at the spot. This was it. One kick to end years of agony. Welcome to a moment in Champions League history.